Hi, once again, Commander Dave Wallace here. Today we're going to talk about feedback and giving effective feedback. And this is maybe one of the least well understood aspects of leadership and helping people to achieve higher performance is how we do feedback. We're going to talk about why that is, why sometimes we don't give feedback, and we'll talk a little bit about how feedback actually works and what might be useful about it. So let's get started. First of all, why is feedback important? This is a good place to start. If we're going to talk about improving performance, um, that's feedback is essential to that. In fact, that's why we give it. We don't give it to make ourselves feel good. We don't do it. We don't give feedback in order to, boost the organization or whatever. Although the organization ultimately improves by it, but it's really about helping individuals to improve their performance. And this goes back to goal theory and understanding about goals. Goal striving and goals only work if we had feedback about how we're performing against those goals, about where we're headed. Feedback provides us knowledge of results, right? The idea that we know if we're on the path. And it gives us renewed evaluations. If we're talking about motivation, when people are going through that evaluative process of looking at instrumentality and expectancy, feedback helps them walk through that process a little bit and renews their commitment to goals and pushes them forward. So look, we're really about what needs to come from a place of desiring improved performance, desiring to help someone to improve their performance, and also to help them to reach goals, because goals just don't work without feedback. So if feedback is so important, I guess the question is why is it that leaders hate to give feedback? And look, I'll be honest, for my own leadership, there are times I really just dislike giving feedback. As I've gotten better at it, it's gotten better, but look, I'll be honest, sometimes I really just hate giving feedback. So think for a minute, and I guess that's maybe a good place to start. Think for a minute in your own life, and look, you can pause the video and come back, but maybe jot down a few ideas of why you don't like to give feedback. And if you like to give feedback, that's great, and maybe you can explore that a little bit. But take a minute, if you're like most people, to explore why you don't like giving feedback. Okay, I'm going to assume that you went ahead and paused, and now we're back to talk about why leaders hate to give feedback. If you're like most people, you've probably given answers something like this. One, we have time pressure. Who has time to give feedbacks? Things just need to get done. This developmental process of helping people to understand their work better, I don't have time for that. I just need to get moving. We don't have time for that. A lot of people just don't think feedback works. They've experienced poor feedback given to them, or they've experimented with feedback themselves and it hasn't worked out very well in giving feedback to others. And so a lot of times we have a hard time giving feedback, and we don't believe that feedback is actually going to work. And if it's not going to work, right, this goes back to that expectancy thing. If I'm not going to do well anyway, then why would I bother putting any time into this? And this ties into this question. They lack feedback skills. I even mentioned earlier, when I really lacked feedback skills, I had a really hard time giving feedback, and that's a hard thing, right? Again, it goes back to that instrumentality and expectancy. It's hard for me to follow through on things I'm not very good at, so we lack skills in it. Sometimes you hear, especially when we talk about positive feedback and praise, well, why should we reward people for doing their job? And look, I'll tell you that this is a really poor excuse for not giving feedback. Remember back to, if nothing else, this is about goals. And we need to let people know that they are achieving those goals, that they are doing their job. We find that often people don't know. They're kind of wallowing and working in blindness, not knowing if they're actually achieving those goals, if they're doing the things that you want them to do. So this isn't about rewarding people for doing their jobs, although I would say that if we go back to the ideas of providing balance and job satisfaction and engagement, that we should reward people for doing their jobs. But it's also a matter of helping people to know that they are doing their jobs. So this is a little bit of a fallacy, but it's certainly one that you will come across. And I've heard it time and time again in my naval career, people talking about this. The other side of this is a lot of times we're afraid to, quote unquote, punish good intentions or to assume bad intentions, right? So I talked about, someone doing well and why we might not want to give feedback about rewarding them for doing well. the other side of this is giving negative feedback. And so negative feedback is often seen as a punishment of sorts. And so I don't want to punish someone who meant well, right? I know they meant well, so I'm not going to give feedback because that will be taken as a punishment. Or, I can't make an assumption that they meant poorly or they meant unintentionally, so I can't give feedback because, again, it's punishment that and they really didn't mean to do poorly. And again, when we talk about feedback, we'll talk about how it's not punishment. At least done correctly, it's not punishment. It can certainly feel like punishment when it's done poorly, but done well, it's not punishment. And it's really, again, about guiding someone towards improvement, towards their future activities. So we shouldn't be looking at it as punishment. And so intentions kind of don't really matter about whether or not we're going to give either good or bad feedback. So sometimes feedback can feel like nitpicking or micromanaging, right? So one of the things we'll talk about is giving feedback often, not just waiting until performance evaluation time in order to give someone feedback on their performance, but in fact, speaking with them frequently, having frequent weekly or more, even daily conversations about performance. And gosh, anything more that can feel like micromanagement. It feels like I'm nitpicking if it's negative performance, and micromanagement if it's positive. It just feels like I'm right in everything. And frankly, that's not what it's about. It's about giving guidance. It's about helping people to know that you are seeing what is happening, and that you can either help them to get better or help them to continue to be awesome, and to provide that constant information back to them. We also have this fear, again, this kind of goes back to that punishment idea, that we're going to disrupt a relationship. We've certainly talked about, and hopefully you have an idea at this time, that leadership is built on relationships and that we need to have these good relationships. So a lot of times people are fearful that if they give feedback, particularly negative feedback, that it will disrupt the relationship. And look, it can, especially if it's done poorly. And so that's a legitimate concern. But ultimately, this is about building leadership and about getting effective outcomes. And so if we're unwilling to give feedback, the relationship kind of doesn't get anywhere, because all we've done is build a relationship and we haven't actually worked with it in order to achieve our leadership results. So ultimately, in my opinion, it comes down to this. A lot of us have a fear of confrontation. And so that makes us fear giving feedback, because feedback feels like a confrontation. And so that makes us maybe not want to do it. So we're going to talk a little bit about feedback theory, about what good feedback looks like, why we give feedback, how it works. And we're going to talk about how to, like, a step-by-step, and how to actually give good feedback, and how we can do that hopefully will alleviate some of these fears, and help us to get past this need to hate giving feedback. So stay tuned for all of that.